When the sun breaks the horizon line over Lake Eyasi, in Tanzania, a barefoot man is already walking among thorn bushes that tear any fabric. He carries only a wooden bow that requires 45 kilograms of force to be tensioned, and arrows with tips soaked in poison extracted from the desert rose. Around him, lions hunted throughout the night. Hyenas still prowl the shadows, and he possesses no firearm, no car to escape, no fence to protect himself. This man belongs to the Hadzabe, fewer than 1,300 people remaining on Earth, living exactly as humanity lived during 99% of its existence. Think of the scenario that surrounds this hunter every morning. The Hadzabe territory is only 50 kilometers from Olduvai Gorge, the place that scientists call the cradle of mankind, because fossils of our ancestors nearly 2 million years old were found there. 40 kilometers away is Laetoli, where human footprints were preserved in volcanic ash 3,600,000 years ago. The Hadzabe do not just live near these archaeological sites, they are the living continuation of this history. Evidence suggests that hunter-gatherers similar to them have occupied this region for at least 50,000 years, since the beginning of the Upper Paleolithic. Lake Eyasi is a body of salt water that changes drastically according to the seasons. During the drought, its shores recede and expose dusty plains where the Hadzabe set up their temporary camps. In the rainy season, the water advances and they move to the slopes of the Rift Valley, seeking shelter in caves that their ancestors also used. This constant movement is not flight, it is strategy. The Hadzabe have learned to read the landscape like you read a book, identifying where the animals will go to drink water, where the tubers will be ripe, where the bees have built their hives. But this landscape is not kind. Consider that the ecosystem around Lake Eyasi is part of the Great Serengeti system, one of the largest concentrations of wild fauna on the planet. African lions patrol these savannas, leopards hunt in the shadows of the acacias, spotted hyenas, which can crush buffalo bones with their jaws, circulate in groups of up to 80 individuals. Elephants cross the territory, and a single stomp can be fatal. African buffaloes, considered one of the most dangerous animals on the continent, graze nearby, and the Hadzabe sleep in the open air, protected only by structures of dry branches covered with grass. There are no firearms in the Hadzabe camps. There are no metal fences. There are no electronic alarms. The only barrier between a sleeping family and a hungry lion is the fire they keep lit throughout the night. And when the fire weakens, someone needs to wake up to feed it. This ritual has repeated itself for millennia. It works because the large African predators developed, over generations, an instinctive respect for the flames. But it also works because the Hadzabe developed something even more sophisticated, an absolute knowledge of animal behavior that allows them to predict movements, avoid confrontations, and when necessary, face them. Ask any Hadzabe about encounters with lions, and he will respond with disconcerting naturalness. These are stories told around the fire as if they were routine episodes. The lion that prowled the camp for 3 consecutive nights until the men decided to hunt it. The lioness that dragged a child for a few meters before the screams alerted the group. The solitary male that attacked a hunter during a honey collection, leaving deep scars that the man displays as medals of survival. None of these stories end in tragedy, because the Hadzabe learn to read the signs of danger, to work in a group when necessary, to use fire and noise as weapons of deterrence. The Hadzabe hunt begins before dawn. The men go out in silence, usually alone or in pairs, carrying bows that measure about 1 meter and 80 centimeters in length. These bows are manufactured with local woods, selected for flexibility and resistance. Scientific studies measured the force necessary to tension them completely, an average of 140 newtons, the equivalent of 45 kilograms of pressure. For comparison, the bows used in Olympic competitions require between 18 and 25 kilograms. Hadzabe archers operate with nearly double the strength of professional athletes. The arrows are equally impressive. There are different types for different prey. Simple arrows without poison are used for birds and small mammals like the dik-dik, an antelope that weighs about 5 kilograms. Poisoned arrows are reserved for larger animals. The poison comes from 2 main botanical sources, the desert rose known scientifically as Adenium obesum and a plant called Strophanthus eminii. The extraction process involves boiling the sap until it forms a dark paste that is applied just below the metallic tip. A superficial scratch is enough to bring down a gazelle in 30 minutes. An impala succumbs in less than an hour. A giraffe can resist up to 6 hours but eventually gives in. Observe the sophistication of this technology. The Hadzabe do not only know the poisonous plants, they know exactly what concentration to use for each type of prey, how long the poison remains active, how to store it without contaminating themselves. They carry the poisoned arrows wrapped in leaves to avoid accidents. If they lose an arrow in the vegetation, they spend considerable time looking for it so that it does not wound another hunter in the future. This pharmacological knowledge was developed without laboratories, without microscopes, without any instrument that modern science would consider essential. The preferred hunting technique is the ambush. The hunters identify animal trails, water sources, feeding areas. Then they wait, sometimes for hours, absolutely immobile. When the prey approaches to a distance of 20 to 50 meters, the archer fires. If the animal flees wounded, the tracking begins. The Hadzabe can follow footprints on terrain where you would see absolutely nothing. They identify the direction of movement by the depth of the marks. They estimate the speed by the spacing between them. They notice when the poison begins to take effect because the trail becomes irregular, as if the animal were drunk. Hadzabe boys begin to practice archery at 5 or 6 years of age. By 10 years old, they have already manufactured their own functional bows and arrows. They hunt rodents, lizards, birds. Each small prey is a lesson. By 15 years old, many already participate in hunts for larger animals. There is no formal school, there are no manuals. The knowledge passes from father to son through observation and practice. A Hadzabe child may not know how to read, but knows how to identify dozens of species of edible plants, knows the habits of each animal of the savannah, can make fire by rubbing wood in less than a minute. And here is something that challenges modern logic. The Hadzabe hunt predators. Ethnographic records document that they consumed lions, leopards, hyenas, and even jackals, not for sport, out of necessity. When a predator represents a constant threat to the camp, the most experienced hunters organize expeditions to eliminate it. Imagine the courage necessary to face an adult lion armed only with a bow and arrows. Now imagine that this is not an exceptional story, but part of the survival repertoire of an entire people. The division of labor in the camps is clear, yet flexible. Men hunt and collect honey. Women and children collect vegetables, fruits, tubers, and roots. But there is no rigidity. Women can participate in honey collections when the combs are close to the ground. Men help in the collection of baobab fruits when necessary. Collaboration is the norm because individual survival depends on collective survival. Hadzabe women go out every morning equipped with digging sticks, fabric or leather bags, and knives. They know dozens of species of tubers, some buried more than half a meter deep. They identify baobabs loaded with fruit even from a great distance. They collect berries from different shrubs according to the season. This gathering work accounts for approximately 80% of the calories consumed by the group. Meat, although culturally valued, represents only 20% of the diet in terms of weight. The bodies of these women tell stories of decades of work under the scorching sun. Their hands present thick calluses from digging hardened earth. Their bare feet developed resistant soles like tanned leather. Scars on arms and legs document encounters with thorns, snakes, and accidents with tools. A typical Hadzabe woman walks between 8 and 10 kilometers per day during her gatherings. She carries on her back up to 15 kilograms of tubers, fruits, and firewood. She does this pregnant breastfeeding, taking care of small children. And when she returns to the camp, she still prepares food, takes care of the fires, and makes bead necklaces that will be exchanged with visitors or neighboring tribes. The men also carry marks of their existence. Scars from bee stings cover hands and faces. Scars from acacia thorns form patterns on the arms. Animal bite marks witness hunts that almost ended badly. A veteran hunter can show where a wild boar struck him with its tusks, where a snake bit him, where a fall from a tree almost cost him his life. These are not stories of war. They are the physical record of an existence where risk is constant and inevitable. The baobab is central to Hadzabe survival. This extraordinary tree can live more than 1,000 years, and store up to 120,000 liters of water in its trunk during the dry season. Its fruits contain pulp rich in vitamin C and prebiotic fibers. Its seeds are nutritious, its bark can be used to make ropes, and its hollow trunks house beehives that produce the food most valued by the Hadzabe, honey. Scale the importance of honey in this culture. When researchers asked the Hadzabe what their favorite food was, men and women answered unanimously, honey. Nutritional studies estimate that honey represents up to 20% of the calories consumed, especially during the rainy season when the hives are most productive. The Hadzabe know 7 different species of bees, each producing honey with distinct characteristics. Some make combs in holes in the ground, others prefer acacia branches. The most productive, however, build their hives inside the baobabs, sometimes 15 meters high. To reach this honey, the hunters need to climb trunks that can be 9 meters in diameter. They do not use ropes. They do not use safety equipment. They manufacture wooden stakes on the spot, using their axes and hammer them into the trunk one above the other, creating an improvised ladder. They climb barefoot, balancing on wooden nails less than 10 centimeters long. A fall of 15 meters onto rocky ground would be fatal. Even so, they climb. When they reach the hive, they face another challenge. African bees are notoriously aggressive, much more than their European cousins. An attacking swarm can deliver hundreds of stings in a few minutes. The Hadzabe solution is ancestral: fire. The hunter climbs carrying a bundle of smoking dry leaves. The smoke calms the bees, masks the alarm pheromone they release when they feel threatened, and allows the man to stick his hand into the hole and remove the golden combs. Even with the smoke, stings happen. The Hadzabe simply accept the pain as part of the process. And then something extraordinary happens. Even before descending the tree, the hunter begins to eat. He chews whole combs, wax, honey, larvae, and everything else. He spits out the pieces of wax while the golden liquid runs down the corners of his mouth. The other hunters below stretch out their hands to catch the combs he throws. Everyone eats right there, at the base of the tree, sharing the treasure without measuring portions. There is no word in Hadzabe for mine when it comes to food. The concept simply makes no sense in a society where sharing is the only strategy that ensures everyone survives. There exists a partnership between humans and animals that scientists consider unique on the planet. It happens in the savannas of northern Tanzania and involves the Hadzabe and a small bird called the greater honey guide, known locally as tik-iliko. This bird, approximately the size of a thrush, possesses an extraordinary ability. It can locate beehives hidden in the vegetation, and it has learned over countless generations to communicate this information to human beings. The process works like this. When a Hadzabe hunter wants to find honey, he emits a specific whistle, a series of angular notes that rise and fall quickly, ending with a sharp trill. This whistle was transmitted from father to son for centuries, perhaps millennia. If there is a greater honey guide nearby, the bird responds with its own call, a dry and repetitive sound that the Hadzabe recognize instantly. From that moment on, a collaboration is established. The bird flies in the direction of the nearest hive, stopping on branches along the way and vocalizing to ensure that the human is following. The hunter walks fast, sometimes runs, trying to keep up with the winged guide through the dense vegetation. He may cover 2 kilometers or more in this pursuit, jumping over fallen trunks, dodging thorns, always attentive to the next landing of the bird. When the greater honey guide reaches the hive, its behavior changes. It stays quiet, perched near the location, waiting for the human to do his work. Researchers calculated that this partnership reduces honey search time by up to 2/3. A hunter alone can take 3 hours to find a hidden hive. With the help of the greater honey guide, the same hunter finds honey in less than 1 hour. This efficiency makes a real difference when you need to feed an entire family, and the African sun does not forgive those who spend too much time exposed to the midday heat. After the Hadzabe extracts the honey and eats his part, the bird descends to feed on the remains: wax, larvae, comb fragments. Unlike most birds, the greater honey guide can digest beeswax. It is one of the few animals in the world with this capacity, and it is exactly this capacity that makes the partnership advantageous for both. The human needs the bird to find the hidden hives, The bird needs the human to open the hives and scare away the bees that it, alone, could not face. Anthropologists call this mutualism. It is different from domestication because the greater honey guide remains wild, lives independently, and does not depend on food provided by humans. But over hundreds of thousands of years, the two species developed a form of communication that benefits both. Richard Wrangham, a Harvard anthropologist and author of studies on human evolution, described this relationship as the most developed and mutually beneficial between any mammal and any bird on the planet. And here arises a revelation that challenges romanticized narratives. Some documentaries show the Hadzabe leaving generous portions of comb for the bird as a form of thanks. Field research tells a different story. The hunters frequently eat almost all the honey and leave only minimal remains. The bird accepts it anyway. The partnership survives not out of gratitude, but out of mutual interest. Both gain enough for it to be worth continuing to cooperate. Consider now the language these hunters speak. Hadzabe is a linguistic isolate, which means it has no proven relationship with any other known language on Earth. For decades, linguists tried to connect it to the Khoisan languages of southern Africa because both use click consonants. They failed. Genetic analyses also found no close relationship between the Hadzabe and the San peoples of Botswana and Namibia. The clicks evolved independently in the two populations, separated by thousands of kilometers and thousands of years. Hadzabe possesses at least 3 different types of clicks, one produced with the tongue against the teeth, another with the tongue against the palate, and a third with the tongue against the side of the mouth. To untrained ears, these sounds seem strange, almost mechanical. For the Hadzabe, they are as natural as any vowel or consonant. Children learn to produce them even before completing 2 years of age, in the same way that children of any culture learn the sounds of their mother tongue. UNESCO classifies Hadzabe as a vulnerable language. Most children still learn it as a first language, but its use is increasingly restricted to the domestic environment and traditional activities. Many younger Hadzabe also speak Swahili, the national language of Tanzania, especially those who have had some contact with schools or with the growing flow of tourists. Even so, fluency in Hadzabe remains the main marker of identity. If you speak the language, you are Hadzabe. If you do not speak it, you are not. The social structure of the Hadzabe challenges practically all hierarchies that we know. There are no chiefs, kings, presidents, or any form of formal leadership. Decisions are made by consensus. If someone strongly disagrees with a decision of the group, they simply leave and join another camp. No one is forced to remain where they do not want to be. This absolute fluidity works as an escape valve for conflicts that in other societies could escalate into violence. Typical camps house between 20 and 30 people, including adults and children. The composition changes constantly. A family may spend months in one camp and then move to another for various reasons: interpersonal conflict, exhaustion of local resources, desire to visit relatives, or simply a desire to change scenery. There is no land ownership in the sense that we know. The Hadzabe territory belongs collectively to all Hadzabe, and any member of the group can settle anywhere within that territory. Gender equality among the Hadzabe has impressed generations of anthropologists. Women actively participate in group decisions. They choose their own partners. They can end marriages simply by ceasing to live with the husband. There is no dowry. There is no bride price. There are no forced matrimonial arrangements. Couples remain together on average for 20 years, but separations are accepted without stigma. If husband and wife live apart for more than 2 weeks, they are automatically considered divorced. Hadzabe children grow up in an environment of freedom that would seem radical in any modern society. There is no corporal punishment. There are no rigid schedules. There is no idea that children must blindly obey adults. Babies are carried constantly, breastfed on demand, and sleep together with the parents. Older children form multi-generational groups that play, explore, and learn together. The older ones teach the younger ones, not through formal classes, but through example and participation in real activities. But this apparently idyllic existence faces growing threats. In the last 50 years, the Hadzabe have lost 90% of their ancestral territory. Datoga herders advance with their herds of cattle and goats, clearing areas of native vegetation to create pastures. Farmers from neighboring ethnic groups occupy fertile lands to plant maize and other crops. Private game reserves surround areas where the Hadzabe traditionally hunted, prohibiting them from entering their own territory. The impact is devastating. Where before there were zebras, giraffes and buffaloes in abundance, now the hunters find mainly dik-diks, wild boars and baboons. The large mammals were scared away or exterminated. The water sources that the Hadzabe used for generations now supply cattle herds, and many have dried up completely. The baobabs where they collected honey were cut down to make room for plantations. The material base that sustained this culture for 50,000 years is being destroyed in a few decades. Talk to any older Hadzabe, and he will tell about times when it was enough to walk for an hour to find a herd of zebras. He will describe hunts for giraffes that fed the entire camp for a week. He will remember elephants crossing the territory in herds of 50 animals. These times are over. Now a successful hunt may yield only a 5-kilogram dik-dik to divide among 30 people. When the meat runs out, the Hadzabe depend even more on tubers and fruits. And when these also become scarce, some find themselves forced to accept ugali, the maize porridge that their farmer neighbors consume, but which was never part of the traditional diet. The pressure on the new generations is immense. Christian missionaries try to convince families to send children to schools where they will learn Portuguese and English instead of hunting techniques. Some parents give in, hoping that formal education will offer opportunities that the Savannah can no longer guarantee. Many of these children drop out of school after a few months, unable to adapt to closed classrooms and rigid schedules. They return to the camps, but they have already lost years of practical learning that their cousins acquired hunting and gathering. In October of 2011, something historic happened. A Hadzabe community of 700 people received formal property titles over more than 20,000 hectares of land. It was the first time that the government of Tanzania officially recognized the territorial rights of a hunter-gatherer minority. The Hadzabe celebrated, but they knew it was only the beginning. Other communities continue without legal protection. The invasions continue. The demographic pressure of Tanzania, a country with more than 60 million inhabitants, will not decrease. International organizations like the Nature Conservancy and Survival International work together with local groups to protect the Hadzabe territory. An initiative called the Northern Tanzania Rangelands Initiative has already helped to guarantee rights over more than 480,000 hectares for traditional communities in the region, including the Hadzabe. The model involves payments for environmental services. The Hadzabe receive financial resources for protecting their forests, which function as carbon sinks. This model creates paradoxes. The Hadzabe, who never accumulated material wealth, now receive money. Some use it to buy basic items like salt, knives, and fabrics. Others succumb to the temptation of alcohol, a substance that was never part of their traditional diet, and for which they have not developed cultural or physiological tolerance. Tourism brings visitors willing to pay to participate in staged hunts and buy crafts. Some Hadzabe see this as an opportunity, others as a threat to the authenticity of their culture. Scientists continue to study the Hadzabe with growing interest. Researchers from Duke University, led by Professor Herman Ponser, discovered something surprising when measuring the daily caloric expenditure of the hunter-gatherers. Despite walking kilometers every day, climbing trees, and performing intense physical activities, the Hadzabe spend approximately the same amount of calories as sedentary people in industrialized societies. The human body, apparently, adjusts its metabolism to maintain a relatively constant energy expenditure, regardless of the activity level. Other studies focused on the gut microbiome. Researchers collected fecal samples from Hadzabe and compared them with samples from urban populations in Europe and the United States. The results were extraordinary. The diversity of gut bacteria in the Hadzabe is approximately 3 times greater than in urban populations. Species of bacteria that have practically disappeared from Western intestines still thrive in the Hadzabe. This diversity is associated with better digestion, better immune response, and lower incidence of inflammatory diseases. Not by chance, The Hadzabe practically do not suffer from diabetes, obesity, heart disease, or the dozens of other conditions that afflict modern societies. Infant mortality is high because there is no access to vaccines or antibiotics. But the adults who survive childhood frequently remain healthy until 60 or 70 years of age, with physical capacity that would shame many urban youths. Their teeth, despite never having seen a brush or a dentist, show decay rates much lower than those of populations that consume refined sugar. Every night, when the darkness swallows the savannah and the roars of the lions echo closer, the Hadzabe light their fires, not just to cook or warm themselves. The fire is the only shield they possess against predators that weigh 200 kilograms and can see in the dark. It is also the place where children learn to make bows, where the old tell stories of impossible hunts, where the knowledge of 50,000 years transfers from one generation to another without a single written word. Scientists from American universities traveled to these camps to study the gut microbiome of the Hadzabe. They discovered that the diversity of bacteria in their organisms is 3 times greater than that of any urban population. Their rates of diabetes, obesity, and heart disease are practically non-existent. The secret was not in laboratories, but in that fire that never went out. Modern humanity developed vaccines, satellites, artificial intelligence,